Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's story. Your likes and subscriptions can give me hope to create better stories and let me know what changes you'd like me to make to my voice. All right, now let's get to tonight's story. Chapter 1. The First Morning. Take a deep breath. Let it fill your lungs completely. Then release it slowly. Feel your body beginning to relax. In the pale light before dawn, when the mountains of Macedon were still wrapped in mist and shadow, a boy named Hephaestion woke to the sound of distant roosters. He was 13 years old, and this was his first morning as a royal page in the court of King Philip II. His small room in the palace complex at Pella was still dark, but he could hear stirring in the corridors beyond his door. Other pages rising for their duties. Breathe slowly and deeply, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Hephaestion sat up on his narrow bed, his feet touching the cool floor. The stone was smooth beneath his toes, worn by countless feet over many years. He could feel his heart beating with a mixture of excitement and fear. To be chosen as a royal page was an honor beyond measure. Only the sons of Macedon's nobility were selected, and even then, only a handful each year. The pages served the king directly, learning statecraft, warfare, and the complex arts of leadership that would one day make them companions, the hetairoi, the elite cavalry and counselors who formed the backbone of Macedonian power. Let your shoulders drop. Release any tension you're holding there. The room was sparse but comfortable. A bed with a wool blanket, a small wooden chest for his belongings, a basin for washing, a single window that looked out over the palace grounds. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, Hephaestion could see the first hints of dawn touching the sky, turning it from black to deep blue to violet. It was the color of transformation, that liminal time when night surrendered to day. Your breathing is becoming slower, more rhythmic, more peaceful. He dressed quickly in the tunic that marked him as a royal page. Dark red wool, finely woven, with a border of geometric patterns in gold thread. His mother had wept when he left their family estate 3 days ago. "You will be great," she had whispered, holding his face in her hands. "You will stand beside kings." His father had been more practical, reminding him to listen, to observe, to remember that a page's duties were sacred. To fail in service was to bring shame not just upon oneself, but upon one's entire family. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the bed, the chair, wherever you rest. Hephaestion splashed water on his face from the basin. The water was cold, shocking him fully awake. He had been told that the pages gathered in the antechamber before the king's quarters at dawn, ready to attend to whatever the king might need. They would serve his meals, carry his messages, stand guard at his door during council meetings, and accompany him on hunts and military exercises. They were to be his shadows, learning by proximity to power. Let each breath carry away worry, tension, the concerns of the day. When he emerged into the corridor, other pages were already there. He counted 6 others, all boys between the ages of 12 and 16. Some he recognized from noble families he had met at various gatherings. Others were strangers, from the highland regions or the western territories. They nodded to each other, these boys who would become brothers through shared service. Your eyelids are growing heavy. It's natural. It's peaceful. An older page, perhaps 15, with dark hair and serious eyes, approached Hephaestion. "You're new," he said. It was not a question. "I'm Ptolemy. Second year. You'll serve with me today, learning the routines. Stay close and watch what I do. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't touch anything unless instructed. The king notices everything. Everything is becoming slower, softer, more distant." They walked together through the palace, which was coming alive with the morning. Servants moved through the corridors, lighting lamps, carrying water, preparing for the day. The palace at Pella was not as grand as the palaces Hephaestion had heard about in Persia or Egypt, but it was substantial. Built of stone and timber, decorated with frescoes and mosaics, it sprawled across a hillside overlooking the city below. The throne room, the council chambers, the private apartments, the barracks for the guards, the stables for the horses, the armory, the library. It was a city within a city. Breathe in peace, breathe out everything else. Ptolemy led him to the king's dining chamber, where breakfast was being prepared. The smell of bread and honey filled the air, along with the scent of roasted meat and olive oil. "The king eats simply in the morning," Ptolemy explained in a low voice. "Bread, fruit, cheese, sometimes fish, wine mixed with water. He dislikes extravagance at dawn. He says it makes a man soft." Your mind is beginning to quiet, thoughts becoming less urgent. They stood against the wall, waiting. Other pages took their positions. Servants brought in the food on simple ceramic plates. And then King Philip entered. Feel yourself drifting like a leaf on a calm stream. Philip II of Macedon was a man in his early 40s, powerfully built, with a thick beard and a presence that filled the room. He had lost his right eye in battle years before and wore the scar like a badge. He moved with the confidence of a man who had transformed Macedon from a weak border kingdom into a rising power that now dominated northern Greece. He noticed the new page immediately. Everything is peaceful. Everything is calm. Everything is safe. "You," Philip said, pointing at Hephaestion, "what's your name?" Hephaestion's throat went dry. "Hephaestion, son of a Mentor, from the estate near Lake Ludius, my lord," he managed to say. Philip studied him for a moment with his single eye. "Your father served with me in the Illyrian campaign. Good cavalry officer. You ride?" "Yes, my lord." "You'll ride well before you leave my service, or you'll ride not at all." Philip settled onto his chair, a simple wooden throne with minimal decoration. "Ptolemy, the new boy can pour my wine this morning. Let's see if his hands are steady. Let the rhythm of the words carry you gently forward." Hephaestion approached the table, picked up the wine jug with both hands, and carefully poured the dark wine into Philip's cup. His hands did not shake. Philip watched him, then nodded. "Good. Fear is natural, but control is essential. You'll learn that here." He turned to the other pages. All of you will learn that. Do you know why you're here? Not just to serve, but to learn. You're here because one day you will be my companions, my heteroi. You will lead cavalry charges. You will govern provinces. You will counsel kings. Everything you do here prepares you for that future. Your breathing is so slow now, so deep, so steady. The king ate his simple breakfast while the pages stood in silence. Hephaestion found himself observing everything. The way Philip tore his bread with his hands, the way he chewed thoughtfully, as if even eating required strategy. The way his eye constantly moved, assessing, calculating, never fully at rest. This was a man who had survived countless battles, political intrigues, assassination attempts. Aran, who had forged a kingdom through will and intelligence and ruthless pragmatism. Feel the story wrapping around you like a warm blanket. After the king had eaten, he rose and addressed the pages again. Today, morning drills in the gymnasium. Afternoon, attendance at council. Evening, study with the philosopher. This is your life now. Your bodies will become weapons. Your minds will become tools of statecraft. Your spirits will become tempered like iron. The weak fall away. The strong endure. Which will you be? Let your body grow heavier, sinking deeper into rest. The pages followed Philip out of the dining chamber, through corridors and courtyards, toward the gymnasium. The sun was fully up now, bright and clear in a sky of perfect blue. The mountains in the distance were sharp against the horizon. Somewhere in those mountains, Hephaestion knew, were villages and farms, valleys and passes, the contested borderlands between Macedon and its neighbors. This small kingdom, sitting at the edge of the Greek world, between the civilized south and the barbarian north. Everything is soft, everything is gentle, everything is peaceful. The gymnasium was a large open courtyard with a covered colonnade on 3 sides. Sand covered the ground for wrestling and combat practice. Wooden posts stood for sword drills. Archery targets were set up at the far end. And in the stables attached to the gymnasium, the royal horses waited, the finest steeds in Macedon. Your thoughts are scattering like seeds on the wind. A grizzled warrior named Leonidas, who had been training royal pages for 20 years, took charge of the morning's activities. He looked at the new pages with the skeptical eye of someone who had seen many boys arrive full of pride and leave humbled. "You think you're special because you're here," he said. "You're not. You're raw material, bronze ore that needs to be smelted and shaped. Some of you will break. Some will bend. A few will become steel. Now, run. 10 circuits of the gymnasium. Go. Sleep is so close now. Just let it come." They ran. The morning sun grew warmer. Sweat began to form on Hephaestion's brow. His legs, already tired from the nervous energy of the morning, began to burn. But he kept pace with Ptolemy, who ran beside him with easy grace. Around them, the other pages pushed forward, each determined not to be the one who fell behind. Breathe. Just breathe. Nothing else matters right now. After the running came wrestling drills. Leonidas paired them up and demonstrated holds, throws, defensive positions. In battle, if you lose your weapon, your body becomes the weapon, he explained. A page must know how to fight with hands and feet, with leverage and balance. You are not brawlers. You are tacticians of the body. Let the words flow over you like warm water. Hephaestion was paired with a boy named Seleucus, who was a year older and significantly larger. They grappled in the sand, trying to apply the techniques Leonidas had demonstrated. Seleucus was stronger, but Hephaestion was quicker. They fell and rose and fell again, both breathing hard, both determined. Around them, other pairs did the same, filling the gymnasium with the sounds of exertion and effort. Your mind is drifting away from the present moment into this ancient world. By the time Leonidas called an end to the morning drills, all the pages were exhausted. But there was no rest. They washed quickly in the cold water of the gymnasium's bathing room, dressed in clean tunics, and hurried to the council chamber where King Philip was meeting with his advisors. Everything is becoming dreamlike and distant. The council chamber was smaller than Hephaestion had imagined. A round room with a circular table, deliberately designed so that no man sat in a position of greater prominence than any other. Philip believed in councils where men could speak freely, where the best argument mattered more than the highest rank. Around the table sat the senior hetairoi, the companions who had earned their place through years of service. Military commanders, provincial governors, the king's most trusted advisors. Feel yourself floating, weightless, peaceful. The pages stood against the wall, silent and still. Their role here was to observe, to learn the language of power. Philip and his companions discussed the situation in southern Greece. Athens and Thebes were growing concerned about Macedonian expansion. Diplomatic approaches would need to be made, or perhaps demonstrations of military strength. There was talk of alliances, of supply lines, of troop movements in the spring. Let go of any remaining tension. Hephaestion tried to follow the discussion, but the names and places blurred together. Thessaly, Chalkidikes, Amphipolis, Thrace, places he had heard of but never seen. Ptolemy, standing beside him, seemed to understand more, occasionally nodding at certain points. Later, Ptolemy would explain what he could. That was how the pages learned, through observation and then discussion among themselves, piecing together the complex puzzle of statecraft. Your consciousness is fading gently, like sunset into dusk. The meeting lasted through the midday. When it ended, the pages were sent to the palace kitchens to collect food for themselves. They ate quickly, bread, cheese, olives, water, and then reported to the library where Aristotle, the philosopher Philip had hired to educate the royal court, was waiting. Sleep, sleep, let it come naturally and easily. Aristotle was not what Hephaestion had expected. He was not ancient or imposing. He was a man in his early 40s, from Stagira, with intelligent eyes and a manner that was simultaneously warm and exacting. The library where he taught was filled with scrolls and maps, tablets and instruments. A globe showing the known world sat on a table. Diagrams of mathematical principles covered one wall. Rest. Rest completely. Today, Aristotle began, we discuss the nature of friendship. It is not enough to be strong. It is not enough to be clever. A man must also understand the bonds that connect human beings to one another. Particularly, you pages must understand this, for you will become the heteroi, the companions, and the strength of that companionship determines the strength of the kingdom. Everything is darkness and peace and rest. He spoke of different types of friendship. Friendships of utility based on mutual benefit. Friendships of pleasure based on shared enjoyment. And true friendship based on mutual virtue and respect, where each friend wishes the best for the other's own sake. This highest form of friendship, Aristotle said, is rare. Most men never achieve it. But among the heteroi, it must be cultivated. You must trust each other with your lives. That trust is built on virtue, on shared hardship, on the deep knowledge of another's character. Your breathing is barely audible now. So quiet, so peaceful. Hephaestion thought about this as Aristotle continued speaking. The other pages around him, who had been strangers this morning, would become his brothers. They would fight together, suffer together, perhaps die together. The bonds they forged here would define their lives. Let the story carry you into dreams. As the lesson continued, Aristotle moved to discussing the Greek heroes of old, Achilles and Patroclus. Their friendship, immortalized in Homer's Iliad, was held up as the ideal of companionship. Warriors bound together by something deeper than duty, deeper even than blood. You pages are being trained to be the new heroes, Aristotle said. Not in the mythic sense, but in the practical sense. Heroes who serve justice, who defend the kingdom, who exemplify virtue. Sleep deeply, dream of ancient times. The sun was lowering in the sky when Aristotle dismissed them. The pages returned to their rooms to wash and change for the evening meal. Hephaestion sat on his bed for a moment, exhausted in body and mind. It had been one day, just one day, and he had learned more, experienced more, felt more than in weeks at his family's estate. Rest, rest, rest. When he emerged for the evening meal, he found Ptolemy waiting in the corridor. "You did well today," Ptolemy said. "First days are always hardest. You think you'll never learn it all, never be strong enough, fast enough, smart enough. But gradually, it becomes part of you. The training sinks into your bones. The knowledge sinks into your mind. And one day, you wake up and realize you've become what you were meant to become. Everything is fading into peaceful darkness." They walked together to the dining hall, where the pages ate separately from the king and his senior companions. The food was good. Roasted meat, vegetables, bread, wine mixed with water. The pages ate hungrily, their bodies demanding fuel after the day's exertions. Your body knows how to sleep. It has always known. As they ate, they talked. Quietly at first, then with growing ease. Shared hardship was already beginning to forge bonds. Seleucus told a story about nearly falling off his horse during the morning ride. Another page, Nearchus, described how he had completely misunderstood one of Aristotle's points and given a foolish answer. They laughed together, the tension of the day releasing in humor. Let go of everything. Float in darkness. Hephaestion looked around the table at these faces that would become as familiar as his own family. Ptolemy, serious and reliable. Seleucus, strong and good-natured. Nearchus, clever and ambitious. And others whose names he was still learning, whose characters would reveal themselves over time. They were all here for the same reason: to transform themselves from boys into men, from individuals into companions, from subjects into the architects of Macedon's future. Sleep now, sleep deeply, sleep peacefully. After dinner, they returned to their rooms. Hephaestion lay down on his narrow bed, his body aching in a dozen places. Through his window, he could see stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The same stars his ancestors had watched, the same stars that shone on Homer's heroes, the same stars that would watch over him as he grew from page to companion, from boy to man. Rest in the ancient world. Rest in this peaceful place. Tomorrow would bring another dawn, another day of training, learning, serving. The routines would repeat, day after day, week after week, year after year, until the routines became instinct, until the lessons became wisdom, until the pages became heterole. Everything is quiet. Everything is still. But tonight, on his first night as a royal page, Hephaestion simply closed his eyes and let sleep take him. He dreamed of running, of wrestling in sand, of horses and weapons and distant battles. And in his dreams, he was not alone. His fellow pages ran beside him, fought beside him, stood beside him. Brothers forged in the palace of a king, bound together by something deeper than blood. Sleep, sleep, sleep. The darkness deepened. The palace grew quiet, and in rooms throughout the complex, young pages slept, dreaming their dreams of glory, of companionship, of the men they would become. Rest completely. Rest utterly. Rest now. Chapter 2. The Bonds of Brotherhood. Breathe deeply and slowly. Feel yourself relaxing more with each breath. 6 months had passed since Hephaestion's first morning as a royal page. The summer heat had given way to autumn's cooler breezes, and now winter was approaching. The mountains of Macedon were dusted with early snow, and the mornings were cold enough to see one's breath misting in the air. But the pages rose at dawn regardless. Their routines unvarying, regardless of weather or season. Let your shoulders relax. Let your jaw unclench. Let tension flow away. Hephaestion had changed in those 6 months, though he couldn't quite say how. His body was harder, stronger. His hands, once soft from a youth of relative ease, were now calloused from weapons practice and horse handling. His mind had sharpened too, able to follow the complex discussions in Philip's council meetings, to grasp Aristotle's philosophical arguments more quickly, to understand the intricate web of politics and strategy that governed Macedon's rise. Your breathing is becoming slower, deeper, more peaceful. But the most significant change was subtler. It was in how he moved through the world. With more confidence, with more awareness. He had learned to read situations quickly, to anticipate needs before they were voiced, to understand the unspoken hierarchies and relationships that structured palace life. He had become, in 6 months, something more than he had been. Not yet a man, but no longer quite a boy either. Feel the weight of your body sinking down, down, down. This morning, the pages were preparing for something special. King Philip's son, Alexander, was returning to Pella after a period of study in the countryside. Alexander was 13, the same age as Hephaestion, and would be joining the royal pages. There was excitement about this, mixed with apprehension. A prince joining their ranks changed everything. Would they now be training with someone who would one day be their king? How would that alter the careful equality they had built among themselves? Let each breath carry away worry, doubt, fear. Ptolemy had told Hephaestion what he knew about Alexander. He's been studying with Aristotle privately at Nieza. Intensive education in philosophy, science, medicine, literature. Philip wants him to be more than just a warrior. He wants him to be a philosopher king, like Plato described. But Alexander is also Philip's son, which means he's been training in combat since he could walk. They say he's already better with a spear than most of the guards. Your eyelids are growing heavy. It's natural. It's peaceful. The pages assembled in the great courtyard to wait for the prince's arrival. Hephaestion stood with Ptolemy and Seleucus, trying to calm the flutter of nervousness in his stomach. Around them, the palace was in a state of heightened activity. Servants rushed about, preparing rooms, arranging flowers, ensuring everything was perfect for the prince's return. Philip himself stood on the steps of the main building, waiting to greet his son. Everything is becoming slower, softer, more distant. Then they heard it. The sound of horses approaching. The courtyard gates opened, and a small party rode in. At the front was a boy on a magnificent black horse. Even from a distance, even in simple traveling clothes, there was something striking about him. He sat his horse like he had been born on horseback. He moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. And as he drew closer, Hephaestion saw his face. Handsome in an almost unsettling way. Sharp features. Intense eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Fair hair that caught the morning light like bronze. Breathe in peace. Breathe out everything else. Alexander dismounted in a single fluid motion and approached his father. Philip embraced him, a genuine smile on his scarred face. They spoke quietly for a moment, words that the watching pages couldn't hear. Then Philip turned and gestured toward the assembled pages. "Your companions," he said to Alexander. "You'll train with them, study with them, eat with them. They are not your subjects. They are your brothers. Treat them accordingly." Your mind is beginning to quiet, thoughts becoming less urgent. Alexander approached the pages, his eyes moving across each face. When his gaze reached Hephaestion, it stopped. For a moment, they looked at each other. Hephaestion felt something strange, a sense of recognition, though they had never met. Alexander's eyes were different colors, he noticed. One was brown, the other had flecks of gray. Heterochromia, the Greeks called it. A mark of distinction, some said. Others called it a mark of the gods. Feel yourself drifting, like a boat on a calm sea. I'm Alexander, the prince said, addressing all the pages, but still looking at Hephaestion. I know I'm joining you late, but I'll catch up. I hope we can be friends, not just fellow pages. His voice was pleasant, cultured, with perfect diction that spoke of intensive education. But there was also something fierce underneath it, a banked intensity waiting to be released. Everything is peaceful. Everything is calm. Everything is safe. Over the following weeks, Alexander did indeed prove to be exceptional. He was faster than the other pages, stronger despite his age, more skilled with weapons. When they ran, he led. When they wrestled, he won. When they practiced with wooden swords, his strikes were impossibly quick. At first, the other pages were resentful. How could they compete with someone who seemed almost superhuman? But gradually, that resentment transformed into something else. Admiration, inspiration, the desire to push themselves harder to match his standard. Let the rhythm of the words carry you gently forward. And Alexander, for his part, was not arrogant about his abilities. He helped the younger cages with their technique. He praised effort even when results fell short. He shared credit for successes and took responsibility for failures. He was, as Philip had instructed, treating them as brothers, not subjects. Your breathing is so slow now, so deep, so steady. But it was with Hephaestion that Alexander formed the closest bond. After training sessions, they would walk together through the palace grounds, talking about everything and nothing, philosophy and horses, strategy and poetry, their families and their dreams. They discovered they were both fascinated by Homer's Iliad, both drawn to the story of Achilles and Patroclus. That's the kind of friendship worth having, Alexander said one evening, as they sat on a wall overlooking the city. A friendship that endures everything: battle, death, even the judgment of history. Feel the story wrapping around you like silk, like water, like moonlight. Hephaestion had nodded, though at the time he wasn't sure he fully understood. But as weeks turned to months, as he and Alexander trained together, studied together, shared their thoughts and fears with each other, he began to understand. This was what Aristotle had meant when he spoke of the highest form of friendship. Not friendship based on utility or pleasure, though those elements were present, but friendship based on mutual virtue, on the recognition of something valuable in the other person, on the desire to help each other become better. Deeper into rest, deeper into peace. One winter morning, after a particularly grueling session of combat training, Leonidas called the pages together. "You've been training for months," he said. "You've learned basic skills. Now it's time to test those skills in something approaching real conditions. Tomorrow, we hunt. Your body is so heavy now, so completely relaxed. Hunting was an essential part of a Macedonian warrior's education. It taught tracking, patience, courage. But Macedonian hunts were not gentle affairs. They hunted dangerous game, wild boar, bear, sometimes even lions in the foothills. Men died on hunts. Boys became men by facing such dangers. Everything is soft. Everything is gentle. Everything is peaceful. That evening, the pages prepared their equipment: spears with broad blades, knives for close work, protective leather. They would ride into the mountains at dawn, accompanied by experienced hunters and some of the senior companions who would observe how the pages handled themselves. Philip himself would lead the hunt. Your thoughts are scattering like autumn leaves. Hephaestion found himself both excited and nervous. He had hunted before on his family's estate, but never anything particularly dangerous: deer, rabbits, small game. The idea of facing a wild boar, a creature that could disembowel a horse with its tusks, was daunting. Sleep is so close now. Just let it come. Alexander, sensing his friend's nervousness, sat with him after dinner. "Fear is useful," Alexander said. "It sharpens the senses, makes you careful. But don't let it control you. When the moment comes, trust your training, trust your instincts, and trust that I'll be beside you. Breathe, just breathe. Nothing else matters right now." They rode out the next morning in the cold dawn. The mountains rose before them, dark and forbidding. The hunting party was substantial, the royal pages. Their instructors, a dozen senior companions, trackers with their dogs. They rode for hours into the high country, following game trails, looking for signs. Let the words flow over you like warm water. Around midday, the dogs caught a scent. They began baying excitedly, pulling at their leads. The trackers examined the ground. "Boar," they announced, "a large one from the tracks, perhaps the old tusker that killed 2 men last year." Your mind is drifting away from the present moment into this ancient world. The party organized itself. The pages would form the first line, with spears ready. The senior companions would form a second line, ready to intervene if things went badly. Philip sat on his horse, watching, assessing. This was a test. How would these boys, who had trained together for months, respond to real danger? Everything is becoming dreamlike and distant. They moved forward slowly, weapons ready. The forest was quiet, except for the dogs and their own breathing. Then, suddenly, a crashing sound. Feel yourself floating, weightless, peaceful. Training took over. Hephaestion and the others planted their spears, bracing against the charge. The boar hit the spear line with tremendous force. Hephaestion felt his spear pierce flesh, felt the shock run up his arms. But the boar was not stopped. It thrashed wildly, and one of the younger pages, a boy named Cassander, lost his grip on his spear and fell. Let go of any remaining tension. The boar turned toward Cassander, who was sprawled on the ground, helpless. In that instant, Alexander moved. He vaulted from his position, drawing his knife, and threw himself at the boar. It was suicidally brave. Hephaestion didn't think. He followed, adding his weight to Alexander's. Together, they wrestled the enraged animal, knives flashing, until other pages joined them, and the boar finally fell. Your consciousness is fading gently, like sunset into dusk. Silence. Then Philip's voice, cutting through the tension. "Well done." He dismounted and approached the fallen boar, examining it. A clean kill, eventually. More importantly, you protected your comrade. That matters more than perfect technique. You fought as brothers. Sleep. Sleep. Let it come naturally and easily. That night, back at the palace, they feasted on the boar they had killed. The pages sat together. Exhausted but elated. They had faced danger and survived. They had worked together instinctively, their months of training forging them into something more than individuals. They were becoming what Philip intended, a brotherhood. Rest. Rest completely. Alexander raised his cup. "To my fellow pages," he said, "my brothers, particularly to Hephaestion, who didn't hesitate when it mattered." Their eyes met across the table, and Hephaestion felt that same strange recognition as the first day. A bond deeper than words. A friendship that would define both their lives. Everything is darkness and peace and rest. Ptolemy, sitting beside Hephaestion, leaned over and whispered, "You've made a friend for life there." Hephaestion nodded, though he was too tired to fully process what Ptolemy meant. Around them, the feast continued. Laughter, stories, the warmth of companionship after shared hardship. This was what it meant to be heteroi, not just skilled warriors or clever politicians, but men bound together by something deeper, by trust earned in moments of danger, by the knowledge that when it mattered most, they would not abandon each other. Let the story carry you into dreams. Winter deepened. The pages continued their training, running in the sleep deeply. Dream of ancient times. Years would pass. They would graduate from pages to companions. They would follow Alexander to the ends of the known world and beyond. Some would die in distant lands. Others would become kings and satraps of vast territories. But this time, these years as royal pages would remain the foundation, the place where they learned what it meant to be heteroi, companions not just in name, but in truth. Rest, rest, rest. And on this winter night, after their first real test, they slept the deep sleep of young men who had discovered something important about themselves and each other. They had discovered courage, not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite fear. They had discovered loyalty, not the abstract concept, but the lived reality of protecting those who fought beside you. They had discovered brotherhood. Everything is fading into peaceful darkness. In his narrow bed, Hephaestion dreamed of riding across endless plains, Alexander beside him, their friendship as enduring as Homer's heroes. And in that dream, he was not afraid of the future, whatever it might bring, because he would not face it alone. Your body knows how to sleep. It has always known. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal patterns. The mountains stood silent guard. And in the palace of King Philip, the royal pages slept, dreaming dreams that would one day reshape the world. Let go of everything. Float in darkness. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. Sleep peacefully.